I'd like to get started on how to use Eclipse to create a Java project, as well as go over some fundamental pieces of code that are going to be necessary to create some beginning projects in Java. So let me start up Eclipse. I'm using a version called Juno, which is one of the most recent ones as of right now. It's going to ask me where to place something called my workspace. This is a folder that it's going to store all the various projects and files I'm going to use. Make sure it's somewhere that you can actually get to. So at Beaverton School District, there are some files you can't get to, so it's a good idea to place it, for example, on the desktop. So what this is doing is it's loading up the various tools I'm going to need, and it uses the workspace folder. So I place mine right here. Everything that I create is going to go inside of here. So the first thing I'd like to do is create a new Java project. By the way, if you can't find that, it might be underneath Other, and then you'll find Java Project. So the first thing I need to do is name the overall project, which is going to contain all of my files that I'm going to use in my Java project. I'm going to create a game which involves the computer picking a random number and me trying to guess it. So, guess game. Sure, that sounds like a good name. Most of the rest of this is just fine, so I'm just going to hit Next. It's going to create a source folder. That's good. It's going to use the basic libraries. Let's go ahead and finish this. Now if I hit the little arrow next to this, it's going to show me it's using the Java Runtime Library 1.7. That's just fine. And then there's an empty source folder. I'd like to now create a file that I'm going to use to create my Java program. So I'm going to right-click here and go New, Class. The class is the name of the actual file I'm going to edit. It's going to be named whatever I have here, .java. So I'm going to call this guess. That should be fine. I'm going to create this public static void main. That's where the program starts when it very first starts running. That's fine. There we go. So here's my first Java project. Everything I'm going to write is going to be contained in this public class guess. Notice that this one matches down here, these curly braces. Curly braces designate blocks of code. So everything in my program for this particular file should be contained within this brace and this one. There's also this public static void main. When the program starts running, it starts on the first line of this particular method. And it goes from here to here. And it's left me a comment that says, hey, you should do something here. The other thing it has is something called a multi-line comment. So 2 slashes make the rest of the line a comment, which means the program's just going to totally ignore it. So you can write yourself notes, or you can comment out lines of code you don't want it to run, things like that. Multi-line is the same thing, except that it goes /* and ends with // and can go across multiple lines. I don't need either of these, so I'm just going to erase them for now. So for the guessing game, what I'd like to do is create something called a constructor for my guess class. The way I do that is I say public and then the name of my class, spelled exactly the same, including upper and lowercase letters. Java's case sensitive, so upper and lowercase matters. I put parentheses on, so the thing on the 9 and the 0, much the way that these two are parentheses. And then I'm going to start my class using curly braces. So things that go in my constructor are between these two curly braces, and it's all contained within my class. So down here in main, what I'm going to do is create a new guess, create a new one of my guessing games. And that's all I'm going to do in the main thing, is do this. So here is where I'm going to put all of my code. So what all can you do in Java? Well, one thing you can do is you can store information in something called a variable. The 3 that I'm going to cover today are Boolean, int, double, and I'm actually going to cover an object type, which is a string. So Boolean, int, and double are what are called primitive types, and string is an object type. All of those can be used to create variables. So first of all, Boolean. What is that? Boolean is a true or false value. So I'm going to do Boolean test equals true. What I've done here is I've created a test variable. This is my own name. I've said it's a type Boolean, which means it's either true or it's false. And then equal true means it's going to take the value of true and assign it to test. So test is going to contain true after I finish this line. And whenever I execute a line of code, I always put the semicolon. Notice I put it down here as well. That's not true for blocks of code, so I don't need a semicolon after this brace, but I do need it after anything that's a single line execution. So something that's really useful in Java is to print things out to the console. Right now I've got my console window down here. If you don't have it, take a look in Window, Show View, and you can show the console right there. So in order to print things out, there's a fairly long line called system.out.println, println. That'll put a return on it. And then you can put things in here to print. By the way, in Eclipse, if you're lazy, what you can do is you can do sysout, all in lowercase, control, and spacebar, and it'll automatically fill it in for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this program and make sure that this actually works. So to run it, one way to do that is to right-click over here and do Run As Java Application. That's the most likely thing to work. Later on, once you've run it once, you can hit this button up here, Run. So what it did is it says true. The way this executed was it went to the main method, created a new guess. When you create a new guess, it does whatever's between these. So I created a variable called test, set it to be true, and then printed out what was in test, which is true. Interesting. Okay, so what about an int? What is an int? An int is a number that is a whole number. So 4, 7, 220, something that doesn't have a decimal place. So if I say int number equals 15, I've taken the number 15 and put it into number. Has to be whole numbers. Let's see what happens when I print it out. So I haven't taken out this one, so I should see true and then 15. And indeed, true 15. All right, double. What's a double? A double is a decimal number that's twice the size of a floating point number. You don't need to worry too much about sizes for most of your programs, but keep in mind there actually are limits on how big of a number you can keep inside of these things. For example, an integer can go up to about 2 billion, 2 to the 31st it turns out. And if you try and do something more than that, that number actually can't be contained in an int. Double allows you to have more precise numbers for decimal places. So I'm going to create a double called decimal, set it equal to 0.2327. And then let's print that out. Sysout, control space, decimal. Awesome. The last thing I mentioned was an object type, which is called a string. A string is a series of characters, and you tell it what characters you have by using quotes. This is text. And I'm going to output. This is text. For this first project, those are the main things that I'm going to need to use.